Hey everybody, it's time for math class in week 7 of school, and I was wondering what it is that we should research this week. Great idea, Brooke and Aaron. We should research football. There's no football happening this year, curse you COVID, so we're going to have to take a look at last year's results. So there's no football happening this year, so what I did is I went on the internet, and since we live in the West, I recorded the statistics from that year. So we've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Calgary Stampeders, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Edmonton Eskimos, and the BC Lions. And what we're going to do with this information is make something called a double bar graph. So in a double bar graph, it's like the bar graphs you'd be used to from when you were younger and you did a survey, who likes chocolate ice cream or vanilla or strawberry, and then you drew the bars representing the people. But in this case, because we're representing the wins and the losses from each one of these teams, instead of just one bar, we're going to have 2 bars. Okay, so you remember earlier I had all these results of the wins and the losses for each team. And to speed things up a little bit for the sake of this video, what I did is I started off with my double bar graph. So this is called the double bar graph because you can see there are 2 bars for each team. So our first piece of important information is we need this up here, which is called a key. So I took this turquoisey green color, and that represents a win, and this blue color represents a loss. So our first place team in the West Division was the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and they had 13 wins, so I went all the way up to the number 13, and that's where I drew the top of my bar, and I drew it down using a ruler because it's important to be neat. And then I checked on their results, and they had 5 losses. So the Saskatchewan Roughriders bar goes up to 5. So it's important that we have numbered up the side of our graph, and that's called our scale. In this case, I counted by ones because the football games only went as high as 13. If I was doing baseball instead and they might have had 100 wins, then I wouldn't be able to count by ones because it would go off my page and up towards the end of the table somewhere very far away. So wins, losses, and down here I have a title called teams. So here's my Saskatchewan team. Both of their bars are allowed to touch. But if you look in between here, where I go from Saskatchewan to Calgary, the bars aren't touching anymore. So again, I made my bars for wins and losses for Calgary and for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I started doing our most local team here, the Edmonton Eskimos, and I've done their wins. And I'll show you how to finish it off. This also needs a title, a label you could say. And these numbers are the number of games, so 15 being the highest. So this is 13 games, and the color, turquoise, says that those were 13 games that they won. So Edmonton, I've already done the first piece of it. It said they had 8 wins, so I've gone up to 8. Now, Eskimos didn't have a very good year this year in 2019, so they ended up with 10 losses. So I check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 up to here, which makes sense because this was 8 and this is 2 more. So it's important that I start my graph, and I'm going to use this ruler because graphs should be neat. So then there, I've made my new bar. It's a little sketchy up top there, but you get the point. And then I would need to color it in with my color that represents a loss. So there we go. So I'm going to color that in blue. All right, not quite as neat as the earlier ones, but I would come back and finish that off to make it look better later. And that leaves us with our friends, the BC Lions, who didn't do very well this year. So here we see they had 5 wins and 13 losses. So for BC, remember I need a space. So 5 wins. So 5 is over here. So if I check, there's 5 right there, so 5 and 13. So this is going to be very high graph on this side because boy, oh boy, 13 losses doesn't take you to the playoffs. So there we have our bars. All right, so there they are, making sure that they're not touching. Remember, I would do the wins, this color. I would do the losses, this color. And I'd take the time to color that in neatly. So I've got my bars, my key, my labels, teams, these being the teams, scale, those being the number of games. But there's one thing missing in this graph. Aaron, do you know what it is?
The title.
It needs a title so we know what this is about. So I could call this, this is the CFL, Canadian Football League. So I'll put my title in, CFL Records Western Division 2019. And because all these wins and losses were in the same year, 2019, I can share the data. So for each team, their wins and losses in 2019. And that's how you do a double bar graph.